Icelandic experience began July 7th. After getting brunch and waving goodbye to friends, I went to spend the rest of the day packing. My best friend and roommate, Catherine, would also be on this adventure with me, which was great to have. Our flight was late at night, so we had to try to sleep on the plane. 5-ish hours later, and we finally made it. Reykjavik. Hello, Iceland. We landed, sleep-deprived, and we were immediately thrown onto a bus heading to our new home. The outside landscape looked so flat, mossy, and rocky. We set up our tents, learned how to set up the 2 big tents, one for food and the other for sitting in, and the 28 of us got to know each other while we patiently awaited our first of many home-cooked meals. We stayed in Reykjavik for 7 nights, adjusted to sleeping in a tent, going to bed practically in broad daylight because the sun doesn't really set in Iceland, and getting into a routine. I distinctly remember our first full day where our geologist guide, Amy, was rapid-firing new terms I had never heard of before on the bus. They all just looked like rocks to me. To top this day off, it rained so hard. I wrote everything I could understand down in my Write in the Rain notebook, but I was drenched. We ate our sandwiches in the rain, silent. Was this our life for the next month? Will I get the hang of this? It's only day 1! Despite this, spirits were high as the group continued to get to know each other and bond. Luckily, day 1 wasn't a bad omen for the rest of the trip, as we had many other days with beautiful weather. Our first hike of the trip was to the 2021 eruption site. We got to walk on lava, and everyone wanted to prove that they could do a handstand for some reason. It was a really cool thing to see. We would regularly go to our favorite local ice cream place after dinner, Scoob, and get some ice cream. Friendships were forming. But you can't have a rainbow without a little rain. Reality starts to set in. Students complain about not getting enough protein. We complain about the French and the British teenagers that are too loud at our campsites. We are still adjusting to life in a tent. We experience the classic Icelandic misty rain every other day. Can we do this? The day after we went to the eruption site, we went on a longer hike to Esja to go to Stein. We couldn't even see the top of the mountain because it was in the clouds. Now, I had prepared to go hiking before this trip. I went to the gym regularly twice a week, but nothing could have prepared me for this. The slow group was quickly established as we hiked up the mountain. We were so excited on the way up, but as we got to the top, we were thrown into the mist. We eventually made it to Stein, which was literally just a rock, and hiked in silence on the way back down. This continued to be a recurring theme for a few of the hikes that we did. Before we left Reykjavik, we also saw a geyser and went to the Althing Rock, an important historical place in Icelandic history, and in Njál's saga. It was time to leave Reykjavik and pack everything up in our cooking trailer and move to Havalir, where we were in the middle of nowhere. We saw sheep, swam in hot springs, went on another grueling hike, but hey, at least this time it was flat, and spent lots of time in the cafe enjoying classic Icelandic music from our bus driver. We also hiked down a very wet and muddy mountain to go see some cool hot springs and potentially the only rhyolite moraine ever, which I can now define. And the Galumbar Farm Museum to see the turf houses Icelandic people lived in many years ago. 3 nights later, and we reached the Holy Land, Hólar. We were placed into dorm groups during our time here, so we were starting to really get into the groove of things. After sleeping in a tent for a few weeks, we finally get to sleep inside in a bed, where we also got to befriend our local cat, Teddy. But inside wasn't without its own struggles. While at Hólar, we continued to do multiple activities like hiking to a cirque. The hike was the worst one we've done by far, but I was insanely proud of myself for doing it. We were off-roading for half of the hike, clinging to the ledge of the mountain, trying not to fall. The sheep below us were practically laughing. I was also pretty stressed for the midterm during this time, but it ended up being completely fine. I've learned what a lot of these terms mean now. We also did some more exercises like analyzing rocks on a tombolo and seeing some amazing columnar jointing, which is now one of my new favorite things. Oh, yeah. After Hólar, we were back in our groove. We felt refreshed and ready to take on the rest of the month in the tent. The first spot, back in the campground, Mývatn, was full of bugs. So many bugs. Despite this, we had a beautiful view by the water, perfect for watching the sunset at night. We continued to hike, this time to a tough cone volcano, saw the 2010 eruption site and agreed that the 2021 one was cooler, enjoyed some local hot springs, saw some waterfalls. Before we knew it, we were on to Egglestader, which started out quite interestingly. We watched Siggy, our fearless bus driver, after driving up the most insane cliffs, get stuck in a patch of grass. We were shocked to see that a tractor, a truck, and a bigger tractor all had to get involved just to get our bus unstuck. Just for it to eventually happen again later that night. But hey, we got a pizza party because of it. Well, at Egglestader, we got to see some more little critters, and by that I mean puffins. We saw sills, dikes, and a woman's house dedicated to rocks before moving once more. At this point in the trip, things are going great. We've had fantastic weather, and I haven't worn my rain pants in a few days. But the day we move to Hoffen, it won't stop raining. We're all experts at this, though, and we don't let it ruin our mood. We hike an insane amount again to a waterfall that we could walk behind, and walked back in the rain. We had a free day because it was too windy and rainy. We hiked to a glacier outlet, which might have been one of the coolest things we saw, which wasn't rainy, but it sure was on the hike back. Saw some sheep both in the rain and not in the rain. We had the best ice cream in the world, according to Mal, and got to know some of the local sites, like the Planet Walk, highlighting the work of the local school children. I'm quite fond of some of their poems. We learned about Gabbro, jumped on a jumpy thing. I even got to take over the Northeastern Instagram account to post about the dialogue. Oh, and there were multiple cats here too. We traveled again to Skaftafell National Park. We saw glaciers in a glacier lagoon, hiked to probably my favorite waterfall to see more columnar jointing, and hiked on a glacier. Then something amazing happened.
An erupting volcano is putting on what can only be described as a spectacular show for tourists visiting Iceland.
The 2021 eruption site that we went to at the start of the trip had erupted again. Well, kind of. It's just a fissure eruption. We changed our camping plans to go try to see the eruption. The next day, we all hopped on a bus and drove to Reykjavik. We were willing to do whatever it takes to see this eruption. This was simply a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It felt very poetic in a way, for the trip to end the way it began, a full circle moment. The hike to the eruption was one to remember. It all took us a while to figure out what hike we were doing and kept going back and forth. The hiking conditions were so rocky we had to move at a speedy pace to make it back to the bus on time. The slow group was no more. I've never hiked this fast in my life. While hiking, you couldn't tell how much farther you had to go. 2 hours later, we suddenly go over a ridge, and there it is. Bright orange, molten rock beauty, spewing out of the ground. I remember immediately screaming and running down the hill to get a better look with my friends. It's a moment I'll never forget. Everything we had been learning about on the dialogue had led to this. It's one of the coolest things I've ever, and may ever, experience in my life. It was so cool. I've never experienced knee pain before in my life, and after this hike they hurt so bad, but the knee pain was still worth it. We spent a few more days in Reykjavik. I got to try John Green's most famous rated hot dog stand. We went to the Pride Parade, and then it was over. We all had our final dinner and hugged each other goodbye. I continued traveling with Catherine to the Blue Lagoon and adventured around Copenhagen for a week before officially saying goodbye to Iceland. I had such a blast during the trip. Not only did I get to expand upon my previous 5th grade level geology, but I also learned more about myself. I remember Mal mentioning the importance of looking inward during the trip. Talking to the same 30 people and rarely getting alone time can really drain you. I always really enjoyed the quiet moments analyzing the beautiful landscape in front of me. I'm so glad I went on this dialogue. I would have never envisioned myself camping for a month in a tent, hiking almost every day, and cooking for 30 people. That doesn't necessarily sound appealing to some, but I had a blast. It's bittersweet that this will be the last dialogue of its kind, and I'm honored to be a part of the last group. Thank you, Mal, for such an unforgettable and knowledgeable experience, even as a business major, and I now have a newfound interest in columnar jointing and a rekindled love for sheep. Goodbye, Iceland.